It's been a minute since we've had you on, so let's hear your story as it relates to intermittent fasting. How did you find intermittent fasting? What things, kind of problems did it solve for you in your life?
That's a great question. When I first found intermittent fasting, it was because I was struggling with my weight, like so many people. And I was just a dietaholic, right? Because nothing was working. I was going from diet to diet and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And, I'm a researcher. I have a doctorate in gifted education. I love to learn things and I love to solve problems. So I thought, surely I can solve my problem of being overweight. And why am I, continuing to gain weight and nothing will stick? So I first heard about intermittent fasting in somewhere around 2009. And I literally would haunt the Amazon diet category. Like, if I didn't have anything to do, I would go to the Amazon diet category and see what were the top 10 books. And have I read that one? Have I read that one? And I would read the reviews, and then I would order the book and try it, all of that. And I would go to the bookstore and read all the diet, the titles, and say, what have I not tried? And so I was just really, in tune to what was going on in the world of diets, but I could not lose the weight. I mean, I could do something for a while. Like, my doctor gave me diet pills and I lost weight, but that's not sustainable and it's really bad for you. And, I did the whole crazy HCG diet with injections also from your doctor. Well, that didn't go well and I gained all that weight back. So 2009, I heard about different types of intermittent fasting. Brad Polon's Eat, Stop, Eat, Ori Hofmeckler, The Warrior Diet. These are all the OG fasting books. We had Bert Herring Fast 5, but then we also had some stuff going on with the 5-2 diet, Dr. Michael Mosley, which is based on Krista Veride's work with alternate daily fasting. She had a book called The Every Other Day Diet. So every single one of those things that I just mentioned, I dabbled in. From 2000, and not to forget the 8-hour diet. David his last name starts with a Z. He also did the Eat This Not That books. See, I'm like a
Oh, yeah, yeah.
diet historian, right?
Yeah.
I could be like Diet Jeopardy, I would win. But I tried all of those, but I would dabble in them. The funny part is every single one of those programs, books that I just discussed, all of them were based on the premise that intermittent fasting only works because you're eating fewer calories. So intermittent fasting is a way for you to structure your eating so that you're eating fewer calories. That is what every single person talked about in those days. And that is what we all really thought. And so I didn't understand metabolic flexibility. I didn't understand, what it meant to be metabolically flexible and able to burn your own fat for fuel. I didn't understand that it took time to work up to that. I certainly didn't understand the clean fast, which I can talk about a little bit later. But I basically would dabble here and there, try a little bit of fasting, a couple days, then something would happen over the weekend. I wasn't doing it anymore. Then on Monday, I would try again. It was really, really hard. I didn't understand why it was so hard. So I never lost any weight with intermittent fasting. And then in 2014, I went on a cruise with my family, saw the cruise pictures, got back home, weighed myself. I was 210 pounds. I was obese. And I was like, you know what? I got to do something. And again, I've dabbled in a few things here and there. The whole summer of 2014, I tried keto because everybody's doing keto. Well, a lot of people were doing keto in that summer. And by that point, Facebook groups had really started coming around. So I was in a whole bunch of those. No matter how I tweaked my macros, though, I never lost a pound and I felt awful. They're like, well, you're just not ketoing hard enough. So I would keto harder, right? Never lost a pound. When school got back started in the fall of 2014, I was like, I can't live like this. This is terrible. So I pulled back out old trusty Fast 5, Diet and Lifestyle, Dr. Bert Herring. It was a 5-hour daily eating window, 19-5 approach. And I was like, I reintroduced all the carbs, started intermittent fasting, but this time something was different. I finally started losing weight. And I really think that time that I did keto, I'd become fat adapted because I was, in ketosis all the time but I was eating so much fat and my body, the metabolic adaptation required for ketosis had occurred. So I can remember I had like this keto breathalyzer that I had gotten when I was trying keto, and it was an old one. You had to plug it in, wait for it to warm up and blow into it. And I would always blow really, really high on breath ketones. Still wasn't losing any weight on keto. But when I switched to intermittent fasting, I added back all the carbs. I remember a couple of weeks in, I was like, I just ate a burger and fries and I feel like I'm in ketosis. And I blew into it. I was blowing ketones on my breath. And I'm like, wait a minute, can we get into ketosis from fasting? And so I started to understand a little bit more about it. The difference is that is the time I didn't stop. I didn't stop. And I lost about a pound a week until I, reached my goals. And I lost over 80 pounds by the time all was said and done. So that was a long-winded answer to that. But, at the beginning, intermittent fasting is something I did because I was obese and I wanted to lose the weight, and it worked. But since then, it's done so much more for me that I didn't even know what intermittent fasting could do. Because again, like I said, all we thought was it was just a more efficient way of eating fewer calories, but it's so much more than that. And I didn't really understand that till I read the Obesity Code that came out in 2016.
Yeah, an amazing book. I can't recommend that highly enough. That's the book that helped me understand what I was seeing on my end. Same kind of thing that you mentioned. You and I have talked about this before. When I'm using a metabolic cart and validating metabolism, resting metabolic rate on people who are telling me they're not eating all that much food, but it's just in a tight window. How come their metabolic rates are so much higher than they should be when somebody who calorie restricts comes in and it's always a lot lower? And I couldn't, reconcile those things until the work of Jason Fung and kind of, helped us understand why fasting would help increase your metabolic rate and help you burn even more calories, which is awesome. Right. It's exactly what you want to do if you do want to lose weight. And one thing that I absolutely want to point out, I love this about your story. As always, we're kind of fans of the carnivore diet around here, but knowing you and your history, you don't do well with meat. You have tried over and over. You do really well on a plant-based, whole food type diet with intermittent fasting. That's great. That's awesome. I always want to try to point out the fact that we don't know everything about every little thing that's going to work for every person all the time. It's just, it's so important to be really, working to kind of find out how things are working for you.
Well, can I blow your mind even some more?
Let's do it.
Have you ever read any of the work from the Mastering Diabetes guys, Cyrus and Robbie?
Yes. Yeah.
They are fantastic. And they wrote a book, Mastering Diabetes. It came out in 2020, I believe. And I read it, and they're whole food plant-based. And at that time, I was certainly not ready to do any kind of whole food plant-based. I love dairy. I love a good burger. I talked about that already. I love eggs, all of that. And so I was like, well, this is great for them, but this is not for me. So, fast forward, I started learning more about the gut. I went through Zoe, which is personalized nutrition and figuring out what works for you based on the way your body clears fat and clears blood glucose. And turns out my body doesn't clear fat very well. And I'm like, that's really interesting. And that's not true for everybody. Some people have bodies that clear fat very, very well. So lately I've gone back to, reread Mastering Diabetes this year. And I'm currently doing an experiment right now. Cyrus, they're Robbie and Cyrus that wrote Mastering Diabetes. They are both type 1 diabetics. So they understand obviously very clearly insulin needs because they use insulin every day to stay alive as type 1 diabetics. And they actually talk about how a low-fat, whole food, plant-based diet is fantastic for lowering your insulin needs. It has to do with insulin resistance. So I'm experimenting right this minute. I've been pretty much whole food, plant-based-ish. Like when I go out to eat, like the other night I had lobster rolls at a restaurant. So I'm not like, a hardcore. I like the ish in my life. But at home, I'm pretty much plant-based. But I just popped on a CGM, and I'm doing an experiment right now with whole food plant-based, and I'm not adding olive oil when I'm cooking, and I'm doing a lower fat approach just to see. And I'm like really testing their hypothesis there of, what they say about fat. And oh my gosh, I'm noticing an amazing difference in my morning blood sugar levels. It's pretty astonishing. Wow. The whole food plant-based, lower fat, you would think that my blood sugars would be like insanely crazy. No, it's incredible. Last night, my meal was, I had I opened my window with farro and tomatoes, and I don't even remember what was on spinach. And sourdough bread. And then for dinner, I had couscous. It was glazed carrots glazed with maple syrup and more sourdough bread. Now, would you think my blood sugar would go crazy?
Absolutely, I would. Yeah.
It went up to 112.
Wow.